Russia assesses in the West. The West, of course, failed to deter Russia from invading Ukraine. There's been much discussion about trying to manage escalation from different Western capitals. What lessons have you drawn about Russian behavior and Russia's responses to Western behavior over the past 2 years?
Well, I think that first we have to agree that Russia had a different plan. That the plan was to take Kiev in 3 days, to capitulate the government, most likely occupy the whole country, maybe apart from certain Western parts. They were surprised, and Ukrainians won the first battle, with minimum assistance that they've got from the West. They surprised the second time with the ability to use incredibly effectively and very fast the equipment that was sent later. Mostly the HIMARS, the tanks that that they were able to use, not Western tanks, but the old refurbished Soviet tanks. But the issue is that, and at this point, I would like to touch upon about the Western reaction, that we somehow stuck on those two victories. We imagined that this is it. This is our victory. We put it in the bag, and it's ours, is there to stay. And I hear so many times like, look, we managed to do this. We managed to do this. Yes, but there are so many battles up ahead, which we still don't have any strategy for. And this is what's most worrying. And from Putin's side, he was shocked because of the loss of first two encounters, but then he adapted. He started gaining and hoping for fatigue, for democratic processes that will somehow get in the way, maybe just slow the support, or maybe shift it altogether. He opted for disunity, and he's seeing that. Obviously, I mean, half a year already that Europe cannot agree on the continuation of European peace facility, meaning that we are unable as a union to continue financing Ukraine's war effort. We managed to do that at the beginning, no longer. So if we would expect that Putin took the first two lessons and said, okay, this is it, I'm losing, hands in the air, I'm no longer able to fight, this is completely false hope. I think that he is now hoping that, with a little bit of time, with a little bit more fatigue from our side, with a little bit of less coordination from our side, that this is his chance. And honestly, he does have a chance. This is the worst thing. And I think I see two possible realities, and we're in this Schrodinger's cat's situation, because now we're in this superposition where both things are still possible. One is that, yes, Davos helps us all. We said, we go back home, re-enlightened, reinvigorated, go back to our governments and say, look, this has to stop. We really have to push it. This is about, the security of NATO. This is about, as Minister Sikorski said, this is about Indo-Pacific. This is about Middle East. This is about all of us. It's about global security and stability, and we have to win this. Right? We have to have a strategy, equipment, money, all of it. We push it, we win, Ukraine wins, we go back home. Yes, this is a very dire scenario for Russia. Most likely instability would start. All the oligarchs that now were contained by the, waiting and suspecting something, but, in this waiting mode, they will be extremely unhappy. Maybe they would go after the government. I don't know. It's their deal. They will take care of it. But there is another scenario, which is completely likely as well. That we are unable to agree on the goal, that we are unable to agree on the money, that we will pat ourselves on the shoulder with, with what bits we can still send to Ukraine, but nothing substantial. That we change the strategy from winning the war to trying to freeze the war. Why Putin would freeze the war? What's his interest in freezing something when he would think that he has an upper hand? I have no answer in this. And this scenario is a very dire scenario, first of all, for Ukraine. And when somebody asks, and I've heard this question asked in Davos here, why the counteroffensive failed, I would ask ourselves why we failed to help Ukraine win the counteroffensive. And unfortunately, we might have done more. First of all, for Ukraine. Secondly, for the eastern flank. And, you know, big part of eastern flank is sitting here for all of us. Really, we're feeling this. And lastly, for the whole global community, this is it. We would see every tyrant, every autocrat emboldened to act, because they would count not the first two lessons of winning Kiev and Kherson and pushing Russians further to the east, but the last lesson, that West can get tired, and this is the moment to wait for.
The question of potential instability inside of Russia, which was mentioned, of course, last June we had Yevgeny Prigozhin surprising most people and marching on Moscow. Of course, there's a presidential election coming up in Russia, probably not going to be that much of a nail-biter, but what is the prospect of some sort of unexpected political uncertainty in Moscow? Minister?
Well, my point was always to say that, look, Russians so far have solved Russia. You know, Yeltsin was not an outsider. Even Gorbachev, who some in the West think as a, you know, a great person, not so many of those people in the Baltics. But still, he was not an outsider. The point is that Russians do solve their problems themselves. Just the conditions need to be right. And we don't need to plan it. We don't need to be part of it. We don't need to actually even worry about it. We have to worry about ourselves. We have to be strong enough and prepared for any eventuality, because it might happen. And as you know, Prigozhin happened, it could happen again. We don't know. And honestly, I'm not very much interested in whatever's happening there. The point is to assist Ukraine, to help them as much as we can, to the victory, whatever it takes, and then to secure those who are vulnerable closest to Russia. And that would be probably the main goal and aspect of what we should be thinking.
The other questions, please.
Yeah. Well, so economic sanctions, maybe briefly. I think that they gave an effect, and maybe Valdis can add to this more. It definitely gave an effect, but the effect is not as strong as it was in the beginning. But look, I mean, if we're preparing for the long haul, and if we're preparing for Ukrainian victory, we need to find new instruments. And Europe is a trading union, first and foremost. We still do have extremely preferable trading regime with dictatorships such as Russia, Iran, and even North Korea. If we are admitting to ourselves that we are entering a new stage where the trade with anybody is in our interest is no longer the mantra, we have to change our outlook. Basically, we have to look at the handbooks of Cold War. How did we operate back then? And unfortunately, relearn and reapply the lessons from there on. Very briefly on Belarus. Since we're talking about history quite a lot here, there is a historic example, 1943. Then Nazi Germany had an ally in Italy, and it decided to quit the war because it was not going very favorably to it. So my assumption is that Belarusian future and geopolitical direction is very clearly tied with the war in Ukraine. If Ukrainians are winning, if the war is not favorable for Russians, if we see Russia retreating back, starting to solve its own problems, then links between Minsk and Moscow will deteriorate. And this would be the best opportunity for Belarusians to reclaim their freedom. And thank you for your work.
But don't